I hadn't heard my mother's voice in almost 3 years. Not since the morning I told her no. Told her I wouldn't co-sign a loan I didn't understand, for a debt I didn't create, just because family helps family. She didn't yell. She didn't slam doors or throw accusations across the kitchen table. She did something quieter, something that hurt more. She stopped calling. My father stopped too. Birthdays came and went without a card. Holidays arrived in silence. I became a name they stopped saying out loud, erased, not through cruelty, but through indifference. The only person who didn't let me disappear was Grandpa. He didn't make speeches about it. He didn't take sides in front of them. He just showed up, quietly, consistently, like the sun coming through a window you forgot was open. When everyone else treated love like a transaction, Grandpa treated it like air. You didn't earn it. You just breathed it in. So when the lawyer's office called to tell me about the will reading, I wasn't thinking about property or money or who would get what. I was thinking about Grandpa's hands, how they'd started to shake toward the end. How he'd still reach for mine across the table and squeeze, like he was passing me something he couldn't say out loud. I drove to the courthouse alone. The room smelled like old carpet and stale air. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that flat, lifeless glow that makes people look guilty even when they're not. I sat near the end of a long wooden table, opened my folder, and stared at the grain in the wood, just to keep my face still. Because grief is one thing. Family is another. And my family has always had a gift for turning grief into opportunity. The door opened behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I could feel it, the shift in the air, the way the room suddenly felt smaller, colder. My parents walked in like they'd been personally invited by someone important. My mother wore a soft beige coat, her hair perfectly styled, her smile warm and practiced. She looked like she was arriving at a charity luncheon, not a will reading for a man she barely visited in his final year. My father was beside her in a pressed button-down, leather folder tucked under one arm, face calm and composed like he already knew how this would go. They didn't look at me first. They looked at the room, at the attorney, at the clerk, at the framed certificates on the wall, like they were measuring the audience. Then my mother turned toward me. Her smile softened, eyes bright with false warmth. "Sweetheart," she said, voice gentle, like the last 3 years had been a simple misunderstanding. I didn't answer. My father's smile was thinner. He leaned close to her and whispered something I couldn't hear. She nodded, like he'd just confirmed. The plan. They took seats directly across from me. Too close, like distance was something they could take by force. The attorney cleared his throat and began reading. Standard language. Legal formalities. The kind of calm, procedural sentences that pretend families don't destroy each other over paperwork, personal items, small accounts. A few modest bequests. My parents listened politely, like people waiting for the only line that mattered. My father tapped his pen once, twice, 3 times, fast, impatient. Then the attorney said it. "The mountain property," he read. "Appraised. Value approximately $1,200,000. The air in the room changed. My father's head lifted slightly, like a dog hearing a whistle. My mother's mouth curved into a small, satisfied smile. The attorney continued, voice even, and unbothered. "To my granddaughter. To me." My throat tightened, not with greed, but with a sudden, overwhelming ache. Because Grandpa had actually done it. He'd protected something for me while he was alive, knowing exactly who would come for it when he was gone. Across the table, my mother nodded slowly, like the house had already changed hands in her mind. My father didn't nod. He announced, "We're driving up tomorrow," he said loudly, turning his voice toward the attorney like he was making it official. "We're taking over." The attorney paused, not because he was intimidated, but because he'd heard that sentence before, from other people who confused entitlement with law. He continued reading, as if my father hadn't spoken at all. My father leaned back in his chair, smug, like the rest was just paperwork. He glanced at me for the first time, eyes sharp. "You'll need help managing it," he said. "You can't handle something like that alone." I kept my voice flat. "It's not yours." My mother gave a small laugh, sweet as poison. "Everything you have comes from family." The judge, an older man with tired eyes, finally looked up. "Sir," he said calmly, "you will let counsel finish." My father lifted both hands in mock innocence and leaned back. "Of course," he said. The attorney flipped to the next page. "Executor appointed," he read. My father's pen stopped tapping. The attorney continued. "No access for my son. For my father." The words didn't land gently. They landed like a door being locked. From the inside. My mother blinked once, hard, then smiled again like she hadn't heard correctly. My father leaned forward. "Excuse me?" The attorney didn't repeat it for drama. He repeated it because it was written. "No access for my son," he said, again clearly. My father's jaw tightened. "That's not—" The judge raised a hand. "Let's be clear," he said, looking directly at my father. "Executor appointed means the executor controls access. The key stays with the executor." For a second, my father went perfectly still. Then his pen slipped from his fingers and hit the table with a small, sharp sound. Not loud, but loud enough. Because it was the sound of a man realizing he couldn't bully a lock. My mother's smile collapsed into something cold. My father tried to recover. "That's ridiculous," he said, too fast. "I'm his son." The judge didn't move. "And she's his granddaughter," he replied, nodding toward me without warmth. "Just fact. The will is explicit." The attorney slid a document forward. An official appointment. Nodding toward another person seated quietly at the far end of the table. A man I hadn't noticed yet. Mid-40s. Dark suit. Calm posture. The kind of person who doesn't smile because he doesn't need to. He picked up the paper, glanced at it once, and then looked straight at my father. "I'm the executor, sir," he said simply. My father's nostrils flared. "Fine," he snapped. "Then you'll give me the key." The executor didn't blink. "No," he said. One word. Clean. Final. My father's face reddened like the room had insulted him personally. My mother leaned forward, voice low and urgent. There must be a way around this. The executor didn't answer her. He opened a thin folder, slid out one more page, and placed it on the table face down, as if even showing it was dangerous. Then he looked at my father again and said quietly, "Before anyone discusses keys, we need to address the note that was added to the property record. This morning." My stomach dropped. This morning. I hadn't filed anything. I hadn't even been to the mountain house in months. My father's face drained so fast it was almost frightening, and my mother, for the first time since she walked in smiling, went completely silent. The executor didn't rush. He let the silence stretch long enough for my father to feel it. Then he turned the page over. It wasn't a will page. It wasn't Grandpa's handwriting. It was a clean, official printout. Property registry format, parcel number, owner line, owner notes section. He tapped the bottom portion once with his finger. "A note was added to the record this morning," he said. "A restriction." My father tried to sound bored. "So remove it." The executor looked at him like my father had asked him to remove gravity. "That's not how restrictions work," he said. My mother leaned forward, voice soft and urgent, trying to regain control through charm. "What kind of restriction?" she asked. We're family. We just want to keep the house maintained. The executor's gaze didn't soften. It's a fraud prevention lock, he said, triggered by an attempted filing. My heart stopped for half a second. Attempted filing. My father's lawyer wasn't in the room, but my parents still did what they always do. They acted like confusion was a shield. My father scoffed. Attempted filing by who? The executor didn't answer with a guess. He answered with the line item. By an account using your name, he said, looking at my father. The pen that had already fallen from my father's hand suddenly felt like a symbol. He stared at the page like it was accusing him. That's impossible, my father snapped. I haven't filed anything. The executor nodded once, like he'd heard that exact sentence before. That's why it's locked, he said. Because the system flagged it as suspicious. My mother's face tightened. What exactly was filed? The executor slid another page out. This one was a submission summary. Request to change the authorized contact and access permissions, he read. Effective immediately. My stomach dropped. Not tomorrow. Not after probate. Immediately. My father's voice rose, sharp and defensive. That's normal, he said. We're just trying to help. She doesn't know how to handle a property like that. The judge looked up, tired eyes sharpening. Sir, he said calmly. Your access was explicitly denied in the will. My father snapped. I'm not asking for access. I'm asking for management authority. The judge stared at him. That is access, he said. My mother changed tactics. Instant tears. Voice trembling. This is cruel, she whispered. He died and left his son out like a stranger, and she's just sitting there letting it happen. I felt the familiar pull, the urge to defend myself, to explain, to prove I wasn't what they were painting, but I didn't. Because explaining is what they want. Explanation is oxygen. Instead, I watched the executor, because he was the only person in that room who could move this from drama to evidence. The executor flipped to the notes section again. The lock wasn't triggered only by the request, he said. It was triggered by the attachment. My mother wiped a tear too perfectly. What attachment? The executor's eyes stayed on my father. A scanned authorization letter, he said. Signed by the owner. My throat tightened. Signed by me. My father's lips parted, then closed, then opened again. She probably did sign it, he said too fast. She signs things without understanding. I cut in. One sentence. Flat. I didn't sign anything. The judge looked at me. Ma'am, he said, have you granted any authorization this morning? No, I replied. I haven't even been near the property registry. The executor nodded, like that was the answer he expected. Exactly, he said. Because the signature was not a wet ink original. It appears to be extracted. Extracted? My stomach turned. The executor continued. Calm as a surgeon. They used a signature file, he said. A clean scan. No pen pressure. No natural variation. My mother's face flickered. Just a fraction. Before she forced it back into grief. My father leaned forward, voice low and angry. You're accusing us of fraud, he hissed. The executor didn't flinch. I'm stating why the title office locked the record, he replied. They saw a pattern. The judge leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. Pattern? He asked. The executor nodded and slid a final. Page forward. This one looked different. A cross-reference alert. Another county seal. A linked note. This notary commission number, the executor said, tapping the page, is tied to prior flagged filings. My father's face drained. The judge's voice dropped. Whose commission? The executor read it aloud. It's registered to a notary who is deceased, he said. The room went dead quiet. Even my mother stopped breathing for a second. My father's voice came out thin. That can't be. The judge stared at my father like he'd just moved from entitled relative to subject of a file. Sir, he said, do you understand how serious that is? My mother's tears returned instantly. This is insane. She cried. Someone is framing us. The executor didn't look at her. He looked at me. Ma'am, he said, I need to ask you something. I swallowed. Okay. Have you ever given your parents a copy of your signature? Any scanned documents? Any old forms? And my mind immediately jumped to one moment, one small family favor that had felt harmless at the time. 6 months ago, my mother had asked me to help with taxes. She'd printed a form, pointed where to sign, and rushed me like I was holding up dinner. I felt my throat go dry. Yes, I admitted, quietly. Once. My father's eyes snapped to my mother. My mother's lips parted. Then she forced a weak laugh. That was nothing, she said. That was just taxes. The executor's expression didn't change. Then that may be the source, he said. My father's jaw tightened. Prove it. The executor didn't argue. He opened his folder and slid a small evidence envelope onto the table. Sealed. Labeled official. Then he looked at the judge. I requested a registry audit this morning when the alert came in, he said. They sent this. The judge nodded toward the clerk. Open it, he said. The clerk cut the seal and slid out a printed audit page. Metadata. Timestamps. One line highlighted. The clerk read it, then froze. The judge noticed immediately. What is it? He asked. The clerk swallowed, then spoke slowly. The filing attempt, he said, did not come from the owner's account. My stomach tightened. So it wasn't me. The clerk nodded. It came from a device logged under the father's email. My father stood abruptly. Chair scraping! That's a lie! He shouted. The bailiff stepped forward instantly. The judge's voice cut through, sharp and calm. Sit down, he said. My father didn't sit. The judge's eyes went colder. Bailiff, he said quietly. The bailiff moved, and in that moment, my father finally sat. Because for the first time, the room had someone more stubborn than him. The judge looked at my father and said, Sir, if your email is on this audit trail, then this isn't about a mountain house. He paused. This is about identity fraud. And then the executor added, almost as an afterthought, but it hit like a hammer. And there's one more thing. He slid another printed page forward and said quietly, the same device attempted to pull the lockbox code for the property 30 minutes ago. My blood went ice cold. Because the lockbox code isn't paperwork, it's physical entry. The payoff came fast. So fast I barely had time to breathe. The executor didn't argue with my father. He didn't lecture my mother. He simply picked up his phone, stepped 2 feet away from the table, and made one call. On speaker, a woman answered. Professional. Tired. Lockbox support. This is the executor on the Carter estate property, he said evenly. I need the access history for the Mountain House lockbox and any code retrieval attempts in the last 2 hours. A pause. Keyboard clicks. Then the woman's tone changed. Okay, she said slowly. I'm seeing multiple retrieval attempts. 34 minutes ago, then again 22 minutes ago. My stomach dropped. From where? I heard myself ask. The executor held up one finger. Wait, and stayed calm. Under what account? He asked. The woman didn't hesitate. It's tied to an email ending in... She read it out. And the name matches the son. My father's email. My father's name. My father's face did something strange, like his skin tried to pull away from his bones. That's not me, he snapped instantly. That's fake. The woman kept reading, like she couldn't hear him. And the access method requested was instant code display, she added, which is restricted unless the owner verifies. The executor looked at me. Did you verify anything? No, I said, voice tight. Nothing. The executor turned back to the speakerphone. Lock it, he said. Freeze all access. New code. Manual verification only. Done, the woman replied. I'm applying a security hold right now. Then she added the sentence that made the room tilt. Also, there was a physical attempt at the lockbox. My throat went dry. Physical. The woman's voice lowered. Tamper sensor triggered. 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago. My parents had been sitting across from me, smiling, while someone was trying to break into Grandpa's mountain house. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharpening. Counsel, he said to the executor. Where is this property located? 2 hours north, the executor replied. The judge's gaze snapped to my father. Sir, he said quietly, did you send anyone to that property today? My father tried to laugh. It came out wrong. No, he said. This is all her. He pointed at me, like I'd invented the logs. The judge didn't flinch. He looked at the clerk. Make a note, he said. Potential attempted unlawful entry tied to a locked estate property, the clerk typed. Printer word. Paper became real. Then, the judge looked at the executor. I want law enforcement notified, he said. Now, while we're sitting here. My mother's voice cracked, sharp and desperate. This is insane. We came to honor his memory. The judge's eyes stayed cold. You came to take a house, he said, and you brought a trail with you. I kept my face still. But inside, something was turning grief into clarity. Because I finally understood the shape of it. This wasn't them reappearing. This was them mobilizing. Papers, access codes, lockboxes, registry filings. Everything moving at once like they had a checklist. The executor ended the call with lockbox support, then immediately called someone else. I heard the greeting. County Dispatch. He gave the address. He gave his role. He gave one sentence that mattered more than all the family drama combined. Fraud lock. Identity misuse. Active tamper alert. Possible forced entry in progress. My father's lawyer still wasn't there, but my father tried to behave like he was in control anyway. This is probate, he said, voice hard. You can't treat me like a criminal because of a technical... The judge cut him off. This court is not confirming anything today, he said, and you are not going near that property. My father's eyes narrowed. You can't stop me. The judge's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I can refer this, he said, and I can order preservation. And if you ignore a lock and trespass a protected estate property, the consequences stop being civil. My mother leaned forward, voice suddenly sweet again, like she could charm a judge the way she charmed relatives. Your Honor, she said softly, we're only concerned because she's inexperienced. What if the house is vandalized? What if... The executor spoke over her for the first time, calm but cutting. It's already being vandalized, he said, by someone using your husband's credentials. My mother's smile died. The judge looked at me. Do you have any security cameras on the property? He asked. Yes, I said. A driveway camera. Basic. Open it, he said. Now. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Not because I was scared of what I'd see, because I was scared I'd see nothing. Because nothing meant they'd already disabled it. The app loaded, a spinning circle. Then the feed appeared. The mountain driveway, pine trees, snow patches on shaded ground. The porch railing. Grandpa painted himself. And a vehicle I didn't recognize, parked at an angle like it didn't belong there. White utility van. My chest tightened. Then movement. A man in a dark jacket walked into frame carrying a toolbox. He wasn't my father. He wasn't my mother. He looked like a locksmith. And behind him, half visible at the edge of the feed, was my mother's beige coat. My mother. At the mountain house. Right now. The room went silent in a way that felt unreal. My mother's head snapped, toward my phone, eyes wide. My father's face drained. The judge leaned forward. "What are we looking at?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "My driveway camera," I said. "That's the house." The executor stepped closer and stared at the screen for 2 seconds. Then, he pointed. "Precise. And that," he said, "is your mother." My mother's voice came out thin. That's not..." I didn't let her finish, because the evidence didn't need her permission to exist. The judge's tone turned razor calm. "Bailiff," he said, "I want the parties held while law enforcement is contacted, and I want that video preserved." My father stood up, chair scraping. "This is a setup," he barked. "She's manipulating." The bailiff moved. My father sat. The executor looked at me, voice low. "We're going," he said. "Right now?" I whispered. He nodded. "Right now." The judge glanced between us and the feed. "Do it," he said. "And if anyone here tries to leave..." He looked at the bailiff. "You'll stop them." My mother's face was losing the polished mask. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. My father's eyes were fixed on the video, like he was trying to burn it out of existence. The executor turned his phone toward the camera feed and began recording my screen with his own device. Redundant preservation. The kind people do when they've learned not to trust a single system. Then he looked at me again. "Bring your documents," he said. "Everything." I stood, folder in hand, heart pounding. And as we walked out, my phone buzzed. A notification from the camera app. Front door motion detected. I tapped it instantly. The porch cam loaded, and I saw the locksmith kneeling at Grandpa's front door, while my mother stood behind him, arms folded, watching. And my father's voice, faint but unmistakable, came through the tiny speaker of my phone like a ghost. "Hurry, before she gets here." We didn't debate it. The executor grabbed his coat. I grabbed my folder, and within 3 minutes, we were out of that office and in his car. Engine on, heater blasting. My phone still playing the porch cam audio in my lap like a confession that wouldn't stop. "Hurry, before she gets here." My father's voice from 2 hours away. The executor didn't speed like a man trying to win a race. He drove like a man trying to arrive before a mistake became irreversible. While the highway blurred, he called county dispatch again. Calm, clipped, specific. Active fraud lock, recorded tamper alert. Live camera shows a locksmith at the front door. And he said, "We're en route with proof of appointment. Please send a unit." Then he glanced at me once. "Keep recording your screen," he said. "Don't trust the app to save it." So I did. I hit record and held my phone steady, even though my hands were shaking. The porch cam showed the locksmith working. My mother stood behind him like a supervisor, arms folded, beige coat perfectly pressed, face blank with entitlement. Every few seconds she'd lean down and say something we couldn't hear. The driveway cam still showed that white utility van, angled, wrong, like it didn't care who owned the land. 15 minutes later, the locksmith stopped kneeling. He stood, and the front door moved. Not much, just a crack at first, like the lock finally gave up. My stomach lurched. The executor's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "No," he muttered. The door opened wider, and my mother stepped inside. Like it was hers. I felt my throat tighten so hard it hurt. Not because of the money, because Grandpa's house wasn't just a house. It was the place he taught me how to split wood, how to check a fuse, how to be steady when nobody else was. And my mother walked into it like she was inspecting an investment. Another motion alert hit. Interior hallway movement. I hadn't even remembered I had an interior camera. I tapped it. The feed loaded, and my blood ran cold. My mother wasn't alone. A man was inside with her, tall, wearing a dark jacket, moving fast and direct, like he already knew where he was going. He wasn't the locksmith. He walked straight toward Grandpa's office door. The executor saw my face change. What? Someone else is inside, I whispered. He's going to Grandpa's office. The executor immediately called dispatch again. There's a second male inside the residence, he said. Not the locksmith, possibly removing documents. The operator asked for descriptions. I gave them, eyes glued to the screen. On camera, the man reached Grandpa's office, tried the knob. It was locked. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a flat tool from his pocket. The lock gave. He went in. My stomach dropped like the floor disappeared. 20 minutes later, we turned off the main road and started climbing through pine and snow patches. My phone buzzed nonstop. Low battery warnings, app refreshes. The camera feed stuttering as signal weakened. Then, ahead, I saw the first flashing lights. A sheriff's SUV parked near the driveway, angled to block it. Another unit behind it. Deputies standing near the porch. The executor pulled in behind them and jumped out, with his appointment papers already in hand. I followed, heart pounding, cold air hitting my lungs like punishment. On the porch, the locksmith was standing frozen, with his hands up, like he'd only just realized this wasn't a handyman. Call. My mother stood 2 steps behind him, chin lifted, trying to look offended instead of caught. A deputy held up a hand as we approached. "Ma'am, stay right there," he said to me. Then he looked at the executor. "You the executor?" "Yes," the executor replied, holding up the court appointment like it was a badge. "And that woman is not authorized to enter," my mother snapped instantly, into performance. "Officer," she said, breathy. "Thank God. She's unstable. We're trying to secure the property. There was a leak." "No," the deputy cut in, calm, flat. "There wasn't." He turned slightly and gestured toward a second deputy. "Body cam caught the locksmith saying she hired him," he said. My mother's lips parted. "I didn't." The deputy didn't argue. He asked the locksmith, "Who hired you?" The locksmith swallowed. "The contact on the work order," he admitted. "She said she was family, said it was urgent." "And who gave you authorization?" the deputy asked. The locksmith pulled out his phone with shaky hands. "Email," he said. "Signed letter." The deputy held out his hand. "Let me see." The locksmith showed him the screen. I stepped closer, just enough to see the sender line. It wasn't. My email. 1 character off, a look-alike. My stomach turned, exactly like it had earlier, because it was the same trick. Just in a different costume. The deputy's eyes flicked to me. "That your email?" "No," I said. "It's fake." The deputy nodded once, then turned to my mother. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have ID?" My mother hesitated, a fraction, then handed it over, like it was proof she couldn't be guilty. The deputy looked at it, then spoke into his radio. "Run it," he said. While we waited, the executor pointed toward the front door. "Someone else is inside," I said quickly. "Not the locksmith." The deputy's posture changed immediately. He signaled to his partner. "Clear the house," he said. They moved. In fast, controlled, no shouting, no drama, just procedure. The deputy on the porch stayed with us, eyes bouncing between my mother and that open doorway like he didn't trust either. My mother tried again, voice soft, pleading. I'm his mother. That's my father's house. The executor cut in, calm but lethal. It was your father-in-law's house, he said, and he explicitly denied your husband access. My mother's eyes flashed. He was manipulated. He wasn't, I said quietly. He saw you clearly. A deputy's voice echoed from inside. Sheriff's office. Come out. Footsteps. A thud. Then a man came out onto the porch, hands raised, face blank with calculation. The man from my interior camera. He looked at my mother once, quick, then looked away, like he didn't know her, like he'd never seen her in his life. Dari. Deputy grabbed his wrist and guided him down the steps. Name? He demanded. The man gave one, and the moment he said it, my stomach dropped again, because I recognized it. It was my father's cousin, the one who fixed things for the family, the one who always had a connection. The deputy on the porch got a radio response back. He listened. Then his eyes returned to my mother, and his tone shifted, just slightly, but enough to feel the ground move. Ma'am, he said, your husband has prior fraud flags tied to property filings. My mother went still, not confused, cornered. Then, like a last desperate move, she lifted her chin and said the most chilling thing she could have said in that moment. You can keep the house, she snapped. We're only here for what's inside. My chest tightened. What's inside? My mother didn't answer me. She looked at the man in cuffs, my father's cousin. And for the first time, her eyes showed real urgency. Because then a deputy stepped out of the house, holding a metal document box. The kind Grandpa kept in his closet. The deputy's face was tight. This was forced open, he said. He angled it so we could see. Empty. Nothing inside, no papers, no envelope, no old deeds, no letters, just torn foam lining and one ripped corner of a familiar-looking page on the floor. The executor leaned down and picked up the torn corner carefully, like it could cut him. He stared at it for 2 seconds. Then he looked at me, voice low. It's from the tax form, he said. Your signature page. My stomach turned. So that was why they came in person. Not to take over tomorrow. To steal the source document today. The deputy on the porch looked at my mother again. Ma'am, he said very quietly. You just moved this from fraud to burglary. My mother's lips trembled. Rage and fear fighting for her face. And before anyone could stop her, she whispered to me, venom soft. You're too late. My mother's words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like a report. Like she was telling me the weather after she'd already closed the windows. I stared at the empty document box, my mind trying to catch up to the logic behind the violence. They didn't come to visit. They came to remove the source of my signature, so no one could prove where they extracted it from. And if they could destroy the source, they could claim the signature was authorized, given, shared, voluntary. My stomach tightened. The deputy's tone turned flat and procedural. Ma'am, he said to my mother, turn around. My mother blinked. Excuse me? Turn around, he repeated. Hands behind your back. My mother's face changed in real time, rage collapsing into disbelief. You can't arrest me, she snapped. I'm his daughter-in-law. The deputy didn't flinch. You admitted you were here for what's inside, he said. The document box is forced open and empty. That's probable cause. Metal clicked. Handcuffs. My mother's breath hitched, sharp. For a second, she tried to twist her wrists free, like she could physically refuse consequences. Then she realized she couldn't. The locksmith stood off to the side with his hands in his hair, pale, repeating, "I didn't know. I didn't know." The deputy looked at the executor. "Sir," he said, "we'll need your appointment paperwork and any proof of the fraud lock." The executor handed it over immediately. Calm as stone. "This property is under probate control," he said. "No access for the son. Executor holds authority." The deputy nodded, already writing. Then he looked at me. "Ma'am," he asked, "do you have the email where your mother asked you to sign that tax form?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." "Forward it," he said. "We need to establish source and intent." My hands shook as I opened my inbox, searching. Taxes, sign quick, anything that would pull it up. The subject line appeared like a bruise. "Sign this today, just for taxes." I opened it. There it was, the PDF my mother had sent. The page where she'd rushed my pen across paper like she was hurrying dinner. I forwarded it to the deputy's evidence address. The executor watched, then added quietly, "Also preserve the camera footage. We have live video of entry and the locksmith. The way." Deputy nodded. "We're already requesting it." While the deputies processed my mother and the cousin, I walked into Grandpa's house for the first time since the funeral. The air inside was colder than I remembered. Pine and dust and the faint scent of his old cologne lingering in the wood. The deputies moved room to room. I followed behind, not touching anything, just looking. Grandpa's office was a mess. Drawer half open, papers scattered, the desk chair slightly crooked. But I wasn't looking for the missing papers anymore. I was looking for what they didn't know, because Grandpa wasn't naive. He'd been around my parents long enough to see them clearly. He'd watched them treat family like a lever, and he'd loved me enough to plan around it. I stepped toward the bookshelf, the one Grandpa always kept too neat, too deliberate. I ran my fingers along the spines without pulling anything. Then I noticed it. A thin gap behind a row of old binders. A slight misalignment in the wood panel. I felt my pulse spike. I glanced at the executor who was standing in the doorway, watching quietly. He saw my face change. "What?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just reached behind the binders and pressed the panel. It clicked. A hidden compartment slid open an inch. My breath caught. Inside was a sealed envelope. Thick. Official looking. With my name handwritten on it in Grandpa's careful script. Not inside the metal document box. Not inside the desk drawer. Hidden where only someone who knew Grandpa's habits would think to look. I lifted it with shaking hands. The executor stepped closer. "Don't open it yet," he said softly. "Let's document it." A deputy came in, photographed it in my hands, then nodded. "Okay," he said, "you can open it." My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, 1 page, and a smaller folded document. I read the first line, and my throat tightened so hard it burned. "If you're reading this, they tried." My eyes blurred, not from sadness, but from the sheer precision of Grandpa's protection. He'd expected this. He'd planned for it. The letter was short, clear, direct, like him. He wrote that he'd already filed the executor appointment with a separate record, that he'd placed a instruction with the registrar through the executor, that no one, especially his son, was to have access. Then my eyes hit the line that made the room tilt. "I kept your real signature safe. They only have what I allowed them to see." I swallowed hard. The folded document inside the envelope was a notarized statement. Grandpa's own affidavit, dated months before his death. It described exactly what he'd witnessed. My mother pressuring me to sign under false pretenses. My father demanding access. Their repeated attempts to move things into their names. He'd recorded it like evidence. And at the bottom was the part that made the deputy's face change when I handed it over. A list of names. My father, my mother, the cousin, and one more person. A notary with a commission number. The same number that had been used in the attempted filing. The executor's voice went low. He already identified the notary number. I nodded, tears finally slipping. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. Yes, I whispered. He already knew. The deputy read it, then looked up at my mother, now seated on the porch steps in cuffs, face pale, eyes burning holes into the wood. "Ma'am," he said, voice controlled, "this affidavit turns your misunderstanding into intent." My mother's lips trembled. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry anymore. She just stared at me with pure hatred. Because Grandpa had done the one thing she couldn't control. He'd left a record that didn't need her permission. The executor placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You're not too late," he said quietly. And I understood what my mother really meant. They were too late. Too late to control the property. Too late to control the narrative. Too late to erase the trail. Because the moment they broke into Grandpa's house to steal a signature, they triggered the very letter he'd written for this exact day. When the deputies led my mother away, she twisted, her head toward me one last time. "You think you won?" she hissed. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I held Grandpa's letter against my chest and watched her disappear down the driveway. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about being unerasable. If you've ever been told you were too much trouble, too ungrateful, too difficult to love, I need you to hear this. The people who tried to erase you didn't succeed. You're still here, still standing. Still holding on to the parts of yourself they tried to take, and somewhere, someone who loved you left something behind. Not always money, not always property. Sometimes it's just proof. Proof that you mattered. Proof that they saw you clearly. Proof that love doesn't need permission to protect. Hold on to that. And if you're still searching for it, keep looking. Because the people who love us don't always speak the loudest, but they leave the clearest trails.